Yeah. All right. Ready to rock and roll?
Let's.
All right, guys. Welcome to the Margins Podcast, where we talk about books.
Yes, we talk about books, the ones that leave a mark,
start a conversation,
and stay with you long after the last page.
All right. So today, guys, we have another good one for you. Like my guy Steve Harvey says, today's guest writes stories rooted in lineage, silence, inheritance, the complications of beauty of family across generations. She is an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a cultural commentator, and the host of the Black and Published podcast. Oh, I got that correct. Where she uplifts writers and explores what it means to build legacy through storytelling. Her latest novel, The Seven Daughters of Dupree, is a sweeping multi-generational story about daughters, mother, grief, love, and the things families carry forward, whether they mean to or not. Today, we're going to talk about process, responsibility, craft, the weight of storytelling, and that we feel both, ancestrally and modern, in the modern day world. I want everyone to please help me give a warm welcome to Nikesha Elise Williams.
Welcome.
Hi.
All right. So, once again, Nikesha, thank you for being here. We were excited to get into your book. I know it's on the very tail end of Black History Month, but one of the goals for us was to highlight some Black creators. And you're one of the people that I reached out to that I was like, I would really love to speak to her about this book. And I didn't expect you to have time because you're busy promoting the book. So I was honestly extremely happy when you replied back. Well, actually, I saw the auto reply. I didn't write after the auto reply. You got back to us. And I was like, oh, yes, awesome. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a great interview. So before we get into the book, we're going to jump into some icebreaker questions.
We are. There is something about that auto response that I did want to address. I forgot to.
Yeah.
I loved it so much. We obviously share the email account. Yeah. I've been wanting to give you your flowers on this so much. The first end of the email is very like, oh, this is when I answer emails. But I did want to read this off. In the email response, you say, please take care of yourself in these trying times. At the very least, unhunch your shoulders, relax your tongue from the roof of your mouth, blink, breathe, log off and touch grass or sand, preferably with the people you love. It's a start. Peace, blessing, and abundance. And just like you said, in these trying times, to read something, even if especially when it's like an auto response. So basically anyone who's going to reach out gets to have that message back. What a way to go through the mundane or like whatever you're going throughout your day and then hear that. So I just wanted to give you flowers and say thank you for that, because I was something from the moment. I told my wife right away, I was like, listen to this. What if every email had this instead of like, let's circle back,
Yeah. The peace, blessing, and abundance, that's my sign off in my monthly newsletter, and I've used that for years now. But I think I first did the autoresponder in like 2024, and it stuck because the times got more trying.
Yeah, it stays relevant. It stays relevant.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So we got about 3 more years of that for sure, at least.
Yeah.
It's one of those things.
I interrupted. We were going to do the icebreakers.
Yes.
So these are very rapid fire. They are book related. Don't feel pressure that you need, but yeah, you know how to make working out better than I do. But we just have a couple. So have your favorite books in mind.
Yes.
Okay. So first instinct, no overthinking. Question number 1: hardback or paperback?
Hardback.
Morning reading or late night reading?
Late night.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction.
One author you auto buy?
He's died, so he's not writing anymore, but it was Eric Jerome Dickey.
Okay. A comfort reread?
Ooh. Anything by Kennedy Ryan.
Okay, we're doing all the great ones. A recent book that surprised you?
Surprise me how, or does it matter?
No, I mean it could be like surprisingly it was better than you thought. It was worse than you thought. Um,
And, and we'll leave it with, you don't have to tell us why.
yeah.
Okay, okay, okay.
I've had a couple of surprises lately.
I'll go with Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome.
And then audiobook or physical?
Physical.
Okay, there we go.
All right. I like it. Some purest answers here.
Yeah.
Hardback, man, them things are getting expensive right now.
No.
They are, but my favorite thing about a hardback is cracking the spine. I love that sound. Like when I'm in a book and I'm reading the hardcover and I go like, and I can crack the spine and like you hear the glue breaking from the binding because I'm like deep in it, so I'm trying to get it to lay flat. I don't know. I love that sound. Like it's
I
not
did remove
like
one. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say like cracking a paperback is fun too, but it's not the same.
No. I removed one of the questions just for time's sake, and I'm obviously going to take more time either way. But one of them was with the hardback, dog ear the page or bookmark.
I write in just about all my books, so dog ears, marginalia, annotations, notes, all of it.
I feel like that's the best way to do it because I'm going to keep these books or I'm going to pass them on, and I'd love the fact that you've added to it, or you get to write your thoughts or how you perceive things. So yeah, I'm big.
One of my most gifted books is Flatland.
Yeah.
There's writing, there's pages missing, probably everything that you can think of in this book.
That book is abused.
It's
what
abused.
that book is.
One of my copies will my loan out, and it's going through some stuff.
Yeah, I need to be re-glued.
Yeah, so thanks for that. We really just want to jump in. It's a great way just to kind of get an idea of your reading, how you engage with that, and to break the ice.
Yeah.
So really appreciate those answers. So the next part we're going to really get into like your process, some journalism questions, and slowly start to get more into your, obviously the creative process with the book. So I do have to say this. So usually in our normal episodes, we have something called 5 hard questions. And in these 5 hard questions, we take from like the underlying themes, the relevance of the cultural relevance of what's going on in the book. And we tie it to like modern day things between us as dads, as family, as whatever, right? And it doesn't matter if it's fantasy, mystery, whatever, we do it for every episode. And we don't do it for like author interviews, but we do try to have that same feeling where we hope that these questions uncover something for the listeners, right? Especially for the ones who haven't gotten a chance to read your book. So yeah, with that being said, they kind of progressively delve more into the book as we go.
That's fine.
All right. So I guess I'll take the first one. Yeah. All right. What did journalism teach you about truth that fiction had to unlearn? That's those different mediums.
Ooh, what did journalism teach me that in fiction I had to unlearn? I don't think there was anything that I had to unlearn. I think the one thing about fiction that I had to get better at was being descriptive in the exposition and really bringing the reader in through the prose, because my background as a television news producer, I was always writing for voice, and then with TV you're writing to video, so the people can see what's on the screen. And yes, there are parts in where you will watch the TV news, where you watch TV news or anything like that, and you may hear the anchor say, look at this on your screen, to direct you to a certain part of the screen. And I did do that as a producer. But in prose, you have to set the scene and paint that picture very clearly. And you can't just have people talking all the time. So I think it's not necessarily I had to unlearn for fiction, but it's something I did have to learn and develop and really work on and be mindful of even now to this day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It reminded me, we had one of our first authors on, Tom Krantz, who worked in Philadelphia and local news for years and years. he and is now an author. He does many things, but he talked about when he was producing that his job was taking a story that's like this long and going,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Yep.
So I'm guessing that for you now you get to reverse engineer and like you have so much more freedom. Not now, but like when you're writing in fiction, there's so much more space to explore.
Yeah. Um, the standard story should have been about 20 seconds. If it was just like a anchor read, if you added sound, it should have been about 40 seconds. If it was a story with a reporter, it should have been about a minute 10. And I used to have a news director say to me, you should be able to tell the second coming of Jesus in 1 minute and 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, so a novel of 336 pages, 91,000 some odd words is a lot more space
Well,
than
a little bit
a
more.
minute 10.
A little bit more. With that in mind, with journalism in mind, when you write fiction, does the journalist or interviewer in you, do you find yourself interrogating your characters, like trying to get as much out of them as possible?
Yes, I think all of my books, because I have an indie backlist. I was an indie self published author for a number of years. So all of my books start with an unanswered question, something that I'm curious about. Something there's usually a news hook somewhere, and it's wherever the news story has ended is where my questions begin. And so it always starts with that, whatever that question is, whatever I'm curious about, whatever I'm fascinated with, whatever I'm obsessed with, and asking questions about that specific particular event. And then when it comes to characterization, and with the Seven Daughters of Dupree specifically, I literally asked them, what are your names? What are your issues? What's going on? Until I had answers.
All right, all right. And so one thing, especially with the $7 of Dupree, it's multi generational, right? And we always talk about pacing, especially when we talk to authors. It's something that like some authors pay more attention to, some pay less. For you, when you're going through, you're writing a multi generational story. How did you focus on pacing? Was that like an important thing for you in terms of like I want to spend this much time here, less time here? How did that like develop over time? And while you're writing $7 of Dupree.
That's a very MFA question, of which I don't have. And it's not that I was specific about pacing the novel, it was more about making sure that everything fit together. This The way that I wrote this novel and the multiple generations was that I wrote them separately. I wrote each, for the most part, I wrote each character separately, and then I had to bring them together. And there were obvious parallels that I knew I wanted to put together in the novel between the characters, and they were not always one to one in the generation. They might have been like a great 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 granddaughter and the ancestor or whatever. So it was in putting those parallels and knowing where those parallels existed, and then finding out, well, what else comes next. um, I think the pace of the novel has a great deal of thanks due to my editor. The novel was a lot longer, as she likes to chastise me for, when I turned it in, than what you have now. She likes to say she put my book on Ozempic. And yeah, it went from like, I think she got it at 107,000 words, and it's like 91,000. So it got a nice little diet. um the structure of the book didn't really change as far as where the chapters were, but there were other things that were condensed significantly. There were a couple of that were completely removed, just to make it faster, but that wasn't necessarily something that I was thinking about in the drafting process of it. I was just thinking about, am I making the connections between these characters, between these women, between these generations? Does it make sense? And then I think the question that I'm always answering as I'm writing, and even in the outline stage, is what comes next. I may not know everything that's going to happen in a chapter, but I do need to know what comes next until I get to the end. And so, like, my outlines are very much like, okay, it happens, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and it's very much step by step by step by step by step, which I think goes to like my very type A list making, check off, highlight personality.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know with journalism, it asks for, or it demands, like, distance when you're telling someone else's story. This book does not. Like, you feel like you're there with them. You feel so much. I mean, just saying you feel. What did you give your permission, or what did you give yourself permission to feel while writing this?
Oh goodness. I started writing novels in like 2013, and I was still working full time in television. And so I've always been able to compartmentalize at work and then take whatever feelings, emotionality that I had about the job with some stories specifically and then put them into the book. For the Seven Daughters of Dupree specifically, I wasn't freelancing anymore. I left television in 2019. I work currently as a narrative strategist for a social justice nonprofit. And I don't necessarily have to compartmentalize on that job. But what was happening in my personal life at the time, I absolutely did have to compartmentalize. So I was able to use the page really as an escapism. And I don't know if I necessarily felt all my feelings at the time I was writing this book because I wrote it very feverishly, but I was able to have an honesty. I'm always able to have an honesty on the page that I may not actually have in life. And it's usually after I say something on the page, I can say it out loud to other people. And so writing fiction for me has always given me a place to go to be the most honest with myself and with others, as well as to sometimes figure out exactly what it is that I'm feeling or how I feel about a situation or how I'm processing something. And so I said this on the Instagram Live last night. The Seven Daughters of Dupree is like a very pretty coping mechanism.
I love that.
I can see that. It's funny because while I was reading the book, honestly, it's a lot of nostalgia for me. It's very much like it's like watching Crooklyn or anything like that. It really kind of gets me into. It makes me think about when I was a kid, all the things that were happening at that time, growing up in the '90s. And one of your characters kind of reminded me of my own mom. It's actually Nadia, and I was like, it's just. I don't know if I don't know if you want to call them tropes. I don't know what you would call them because in our culture, it's kind of just they're everywhere. They're pervasive, but just certain things that like your elders say, certain things that you always feel responsible to to push forward. I don't know, like the whole book encapsulated that for me. And I remember when I finished reading, the first thing that I told my fiance, I was like, "You got to read this book, man. Like you would love this book." She's not
Thank you.
but she does love like anything about like the Black experience, and I think that you do heavily encapsulate not just the Black experience, but as a woman, like the different. I don't know, like the different lives, different, and because not everyone has the same temperament, everyone's different, even just generationally, everyone's different. I think that, yeah, I think you did a great job of capturing that, like that essence of who we are. And there's a lot of small things. I was like, man, this is great. This is awesome. And so I already knew this is going to be one of my favorites from the year, just from, like, I was like maybe 3 chapters in, I was like, man, this is awesome. This is.
Thank you.
You bring or compartmentalizing. It reminded me. My wife is a therapist, and while she was getting to that point, she also worked in a psych ward for children. So she'd come home with. You can imagine these types of stories, and I think those that are able to, whether it's dealing with something as nuanced as news or children or your personal obstacles in life, and you're able to champion them in some sort of creative medium for others to be able to experience or at least hear in one way or another, I think should always be honored because of your willingness to do so. Others get to know that they're not alone in those moments. They they can feel seen. They can feel like, oh, I'm not the only one going through this. So again, as I said before, this is going to be a day of flowers because we appreciate so much this book and what you've done here.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Thank you.
So I remember before we decided on reaching out to you, we were like, and he was like, what book do you want to do? I was like, honestly, or I told you, I was like, I want to do Roll of Thunder. But I was like, dang, I don't want to do Roll of Thunder because then we got to get to Road to Memphis, like all that other stuff. And
Yes.
so I'm happy with the pivot that we took because this book still covers a lot of the things that I wanted our listeners and like people who haven't read Roll of Thunder Hear My Cry, stuff like that, to delve into. It still deals with a lot of the same core cultural things in essence. So super happy with the pivot.
And we even said, we were talking about it today, and I was like, I see this being in, I would hope that this would be in school education.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
That this would be a required reading or an AP Lit or something. As I was reading, it's like, this is beautifully written.
Yeah.
And has so many levels of education that we need. So yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, I remember, so of course, it was one of my AP English classes in college. We did passing, and for a lot of people, no one. My professor, it was probably two black people in that class, my professor and me, and so I guess what people take away from certain books is different. And to be honest, I hadn't came across. My family's from the South, by the way. Like they're like, I'm a first generation Los Angeles. I would say Angelino, and but my whole family's from Georgia, and I only just recently started delving into that and getting to know them and seeing how everyone's spread out and why did we end up in California and everyone else is on the East Coast or in the South. And so passing was something I was really familiar with until I read that in college, and then I was like, dang, this is like people actually did this, And then it's funny because you actually go over that in your own way in the book, right? One of your characters, a couple of your characters, but specifically Juby. That's something that that's a tactic. It's something that she does, and I was like, that's so interesting. Like the power, obviously the power of our skin, but like I never really thought about internally what it like, the reasons why someone would want to pass. I get it. It's from external reasons in terms of like, just being treated better. But like the life Juby was so. I'm getting kind of ahead. We're supposed to talk about the book a little bit later, but I love. Well, she's one of my favorite characters to be honest, because I think that she, as flawed as some people might read her as, she was honestly she wanted to be treated equal, but in a different way than everyone else. It's kind of it kind of reminds me of like some conversations that we used to have in the mosque about the difference between MLK and Malcolm X, about like some people being okay with being segregated or separated and that being their level of success. Like, okay, now we're our own bar versus integration and what that meant in terms of like measuring yourself by someone else's standards. And that's my mind kind of goes through all these loops because obviously I have like a long history with this and then also I am, and I'm Muslim, so we talk about this stuff all the time. But yeah, I do think, going back to what I said earlier, you talk about some very important things in here. I know that passing probably isn't a thing for us nowadays, but I do think it's important for people to like read those stories.
I don't know whether or not passing is. Excuse me. I don't know whether or not passing is not a thing. I remember seeing something a couple of years ago on Instagram, and a girl was talking about how she just found out that like her grandmother was black, and she didn't know that the family was black, and they were all just finding out, and it was like messing with their identity and their conceptions of themselves. I think of the poet Roberto Garcia. He has a poem in one of his collections in the anthology he released a couple of years ago called La Casta, and he's from the Dominican Republic, so he's maybe he's brown skinned, And so, and basically, the poem goes through what is essentially a breeding map of how you can breed the blackness out of someone, or how you can breed the indigeneity out of someone, so that with enough mixing, you don't know their origin, and you don't know that they are now technically passing, or that they have any of this other kind of ancestry. And so, I don't think it's as necessary as it may have been in the late 1800s and early 1900s. But, you know, the culture that we live in, and especially thinking about beauty and fashion, loves ethnic ambiguity, where you
Yeah.
don't really know what box someone fits in. And it's like, you're not all the way white. There's something else in there, but I can't quite put my finger
I
on
feel
it.
like you're talking to
Or
me.
it's like you've got blonde hair, you have fair skin, but the nose is a little wide, the lips are a little full. Somebody in your family is black, right? So we still are very conditioned to try to put people in the boxes that we think that they belong in. And for better or worse, in the novel, I wanted to see what happens when you cannot sustain that kind of life, and you have to reckon with who you are and what is in you with your family.
Right.
8 years. 8 years of marriage. That's what when that line was said, I was just like, because I think I just went over that really quickly. But then when she goes back in and is talking to him again, and she's like, I love this man. We were married for 8 years. I was like, man, that is a life for a lot of people, you know? That's
Yes.
memories.
Yeah, that's insane. That was their ending meeting, like the last time her and Logan met. I do like that you went over. I'm sorry, guys, so we're getting way ahead of ourselves. It's a small. I guess this might be a little split. I might start this, but hey,
We're here now. It's fine.
Yeah, we're here. We've arrived.
One of my favorite parts is just acknowledging that he still felt something for her too, right?
Yes.
Like that, I thought that was important, like an important part of the story, because I don't think that I don't know, like it's weird. Everyone kind of engages with these things different, but what do you do when this happens? You think you love someone, and then, or you do love someone, because they were married for 8 years. I think they had a few kids or something like that, but they couldn't have boys, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then all of a sudden he finds out she's black, and in that 1 second he switches up. And I'm like, what the hell? Like what, And so from that anger to growing into when he was, they were old by the time they met again. Well, they seen each other at the store and stuff, but at that time they're partying. For him to acknowledge that he still felt something was just interesting. Cause I like nuance. I like nuance in my stories, So I definitely thought that was pretty cool. But
So like in those couple of scenes, so like the scene where you're first like officially introduced to Juby, like not when she's in the background of other people, of other characters, but when you're first officially introduced to her from her perspective, is as she's giving birth to their first child. So
right.
it's already a very stressful and tense moment. And you think your wife is white, and you think she's going to have a baby that is as white as she has claimed to be and as you are. So then you see this dark child, and it's immediate anger because you think of betrayal, you think of infidelity, you want to know who it is, and it's immediately anger. And at that time, racism and white supremacy too was rampant. So he already had those bigoted feelings. And which is why that rage is so palpable. And so then when they calm him down and say, no, 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 she was passing, we're black, this is our baby, let me take them home. And Emma does that for Juby in that moment, and he agrees to it and is like, I bet not ever see you outside again or anything like that. And like it really threatens her life. And I think that's something that people miss, is that one of the reasons like she didn't leave the house and leave the farm is because she was under the threat of death. Like,
Right.
she absolutely did not leave. She was going nowhere. She was going no further than the fence post of the porch, right?
Right.
And so, and there's a scene I think in Ruby's chapter, and you all know who Ruby is, but I won't spoil
Mhm.
it. But like in Ruby's chapter, I think there are a few lines about how he treats her on account of who she is and what he had never heard about her or Juby, his wife for that matter. So then when you get to the end of the novel where she goes and she stands up for the family after what has happened to Gladys, years have passed, grand children and grandchildren have happened, and he's had heard nothing untoward about the woman who was his wife. And so time has been kind in now in the way that he thinks of her, even though at the moment and in the moment it was all rage.
Right. Okay. I love that insight.
Yeah.
You can make this a film?
I would love to make this. Actually, no, I don't want to make it a film. I would love to make this a mini series, like a 7 or 8 episode mini series, one
Okay.
episode per daughter, and then maybe some resolution for the epilogue at the end, and do that. My agents are trying, and we'll see.
All right. All right.
I don't think they're gonna have to try very hard.
Yeah, definitely. This is
So.
From your lips to God's ears,
Yeah.
okay?
So I guess we gotta go back to our written questions. But one of the things that one of the things that we spoke about, which I definitely wanted to bring up, because it's a thing. It's a thing for everyone. At least in Black culture, like silence is a huge thing. Whether it's a creepy uncle or whatever. Like there's a million different things that kind of come with that. When does silence protect the family, and when does it fracture it? This is one of the questions that we wrote just off the cusp of reading the different generations and what they had to go through, because all the daughters did with their own version of this.
I don't know that silence ever protects a family. I think that there are times in a child's life where you may not tell them the full truth, but at some point they do deserve it. I don't think silence is ever protective. I think silence, in choosing silence about whatever the family secrets are, you are trying to protect yourself as the parent. You are trying to keep a distance or not expose your own shame or your own embarrassment or your own guilt or your own insecurities about choices that you have made or choices that other members of your family have made or things that have happened to you, which is what I wanted to do in the novel with every character. I thought of like the secrets as turning points, and I wanted them to be either choices they deliberately made or things that happened to them that were no fault of their own, and then they had to figure out how to survive and thrive and be resilient, but also parents on the other side of those turning points. And so their decisions to not speak about the lowest moments of their lives do their progeny no favors. They do their daughters no favors. And I think you see that even as the daughters become mothers themselves, they've been brought up in this family and culture of silence and not questioning and keeping their thoughts to themselves before they get fussed at or popped in the mouth or cussed out or whatever the case may be. That, they continue to a degree, they continue to pass those silences down. And I think what I was trying to do is show that even as each successive generation was trying to do better by her daughter than her mother did by her, they still fell short. It was still not enough. And their daughters still question them more than they ever questioned their mothers. So that by the time that you get to Tati in that basement asking questions about who her father is and demanding to know his name and like screaming at the top of her lungs, like, just tell me, what is his name? What is his name? What is his name? You see how over the generations it had built up the questions that she had won, but it unlocked everybody else's questions.
Awesome. I love that. So because I thought about this from different. I thought deep into this. I could probably spend a whole podcast just on this question of silence affecting family, fracturing, etc. But even like with Juby, because we already spoke about her a little bit, she was silent to the world about what happened, right? Obviously under threat of danger, but that became resentment, for her own blackness, her daughter, etc. And I think that it's I thought this was like I said, this one question could be exposed over all of every single character and just different things that they deal with. So yeah, I love the answers. Thank you.
I also just love, like, because Juby ends up making a remark to Ruby early, before that chat, before you find out, and you're like, oh, I think she says, like, even after all I've done to try to give you, this great life, you went and did me, or like, in that, paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, by what means? I love when an author writes that way, and then it's revealed later on, and you're like, oh, I get why this was happening. And there's so much of that in this book because of the multi-generations. I love how you weave that in.
Thank you.
Of course. Your writing honors women across many generations in this, as we were just saying. How important was it for you to show all of the colors of strength, responsibility, leadership, struggle, acceptance? Because I feel like for so many times we boil it down to one thing, or when we try to champion, femininity, that it's one thing. I feel like this book does so much to give every character their own characteristic, their own strength, their own weakness. Really humanizes it. How important was that to you?
I think it's at the center of everything that I do. I write mostly about Black women. I am endlessly interested in how we live our lives, and I think some of that is it's self-centering. Excuse me. Some of that is self-centering, wanting to see myself in the story, wanting to be reflected in the pages of a book that I'm reading, but also just wondering, how do we do what it is that we do, and then even in the doing, how are we feeling about it? And so I am intentional about making sure that every character has like a distinct something, like a tick or something. Whatever it is, I'm very distinct about what that is for that character from the earliest days of my self-publishing career. With the characters in the Seven Daughters of Dupree specifically, because I knew I was going to lean into whatever their turning points were, and I was going to make what those moments in their lives were not the entirety of their personality, but inform their personality. I had to be as honest about what that looked like in life to bring it to the page. So all of the insecurities, the vulnerabilities, the colorism, the indignities that they experience, just like little slights. Like one I always think of is like when I think Juby gives Ruby a small tooth comb to do her hair. Like it's subtle, but in the Black community, that is an indignity. If you have this full shock of thick, natural hair, a rat tail comb is not going through it, friend.
It's not doing it. It's not
Like
doing it.
it's not even going through the ends, friend. Okay, like
Mm-hmm.
you need a wide tooth comb, heavy on the plastic, right? Before you can get to anything with small teeth. So it's those little things, how Gladys's one-liners, they are just hurtful enough even as she's trying to ask questions. Same thing with Nadia. Like in the very first scene, she's belittling and demeaning her daughter's birthday.
Right.
On her birthday, even as she's going to take her out to celebrate, she is still demeaning of it and belittling her. And so all of those little digs and those little idiosyncrasies, that's the way we really are in real life. And so I wanted to include that in this family.
I was gonna say, like, especially with Nadia, I remember when I was first going through that, reading that, I was like, this is such a thing of the times. Like in the early '90s, everyone's struggling, and people are still trying to make it, and like the generations are so different, right? So you have like if you're two generations removed, they still have a lot of the oral tradition, or so that's your Mimi, your Noni, your whatever, and whatever your grandma, you might call your grandma your family, and they still pass on a lot of stuff orally. They're still very traditional based on their parents, and then that kind of gets watered down as you go through. But by the time we get to like Nadia's time, which is like my mother's age, right? Like there's so much going on in the world at that time that I'm not gonna say it's children having children, but it's like they're raising someone at the same time, still trying to get their own shit together. So they have no
Yeah.
time to deal with like your questions, your wants, your needs. So, because I remember being young and like days like that, and it's insane. So, like I said earlier, I absolutely appreciate the nuance of stories that you brought to this, and that being one of the ones I took note of. Her, giving her issues about her birthday on her birthday, right? Like, and how like no one's bigger than a program when like in I'm not gonna say that is the truth, but like in Black struggle, like no one's bigger than a program. We're all struggling, and it's kind of like if you ever see someone like a chip on their shoulder, if you ever met someone who talks like that, that seems to be what they're carrying around, is that like, oh, we're all struggling. And it's just like it's interesting to view it from the, I guess, the way that you painted it with through the Seven Daughters of Dupree. But yeah, and everyone deals with it in their own way. Whether it's Nadia or if we go back, right? Because I think Emma also had the same thing. They all had the same thing with wanting to know who their father was. They all dealt with it in a very different way, though.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I definitely appreciate it. I definitely appreciate the nuance of like I don't know. It gave it kind of personality. It gave it personality. It's kind of hard to describe those lived in situations.
Well, I mean, I'm a mother of two children, and in the writing of this book, I was absolutely trying to get my shit together. Um, and I don't think that as a parent, there is ever a moment when you're raising children, especially young children, that you feel like you do have it all together. And that doesn't just mean financially. Um, because emotionally you could be a mess and be a wreck and the bills be paid, right? Um, and so in Nadia and Tati's dynamic, you see her struggle daily in her motherhood with showing up as best as she can for her daughter and for herself and her shortcomings. And the end of the book, of at least part three anyway, where Tati's I think 19 and Nadia's in the basement and it's New Year's Eve and everything and the big reveal has happened and this anticipatory moment or whatever, you see Tati see her mother now as just a woman and not just as her mother. And it's at some point in our lives as children we have to see our parents as just men and women and not just as our parents.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think where a lot of the pain comes from is when, not for everyone, but for those the kids, the children that see their parents like that too young, when they're way too young, and that's revealed to them. Where we've had a couple that when we had Casey on, when we had Fritz on, he was like, oh yeah, realizing when I was barely a teen that my mom's just another human, and I have to take care of her and myself. And but even when you were saying kids raising kids, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, well, I really don't, I've a little one too. I was like, I definitely don't have my shit together, like all to the degree that I assumed my parents did, or that I assumed parenthood would bring me.
Yeah.
So I again championing the voice of whether it's through your own story, which you're open about, or those that you write about. It's nice again to hear. Oh, okay. So we're all in
the same.
We can be better, yeah.
Definitely
Less secrets, but
yeah. That's an interesting one because obviously I grew up extremely Black. Baptist churches, like extremely. And so I'm not saying like I try to distance myself from it because obviously I joined the Nation of Islam after a certain age, but like the Black pain part I did because you're inundated with it from the time you're a child until you're an adult. You kind of pick and choose the mediums that you delve into. there's something I told him before as well. But for this book, I didn't feel the need to distance myself. I guess because like the whole nostalgia and like there's like a cultural feel you get in every era that's very intriguing. And so one of the things that is not on the paper that I wanted to ask was, did you do any research just to make sure that you peg like all the cultural, like the things that you go through? Because you go through various decades, but it all seems so like spot on,
Yeah.
like very real, very intact. And I'm like, how much research did you do for Seven Daughters of Dupree?
Um, I am a history nerd, and I usually say anything that I have done or am doing informs what I'm going to do next. And so, what I mean by that is for this book specifically, in 2020, I wrote an essay for the Bitter Southerner called "The Spirits of American Beach," which is about a plantation here in Jacksonville, uh, where I live in Florida. Well, it's about American Beach, which is north of me, and it's also connected to a plantation. And so the story of that is Anna Kingsley was like 13 years old when she was kidnapped from Senegal by Zephaniah Kingsley in like 1790 something. First taken to Cuba, brought to Florida. When she got to Florida, she was pregnant, and she was recognized as his wife. I believe she had 4 children for him. He emancipated her. She emancipated their children and other members of their family, but ended up running the plantation, which is still here in Jacksonville and preserved. Like they do a Kingsley Plantation Heritage celebration like every February during Black History Month. And so I had written about Kingsley Plantation in connection to American Beach because Anna Kingsley's great grandson was a man named Abraham Lincoln Lewis, who was Florida's first Black millionaire. He and his partners formed what was known as the Afro-American Life Insurance Company. And in the 1930s, they bought 200 acres of land in Nassau County, which is the next county north of me, right before the Georgia line in Florida. And they bought 200 acres of beachfront property, named it American Beach, and it was so that Black people would have a place to come for rest and relaxation and respite from segregation. That was their own beach because you couldn't go to the white beaches. And so I actually interviewed for that story. I interviewed Dr. Janetta Beshcole, who was Spelman's first Black woman president, and did stuff with the Smithsonian, who's the great granddaughter of Abraham Lincoln Lewis. And then I interviewed her granddaughter as well, so a woman named Perry Francis, and had all of that information flowing in my mind. So when you read the Seven Daughters of Dupree and you hear about their beach and land that they have, that was kind of the inspiration. The other inspiration for the historical portion of the story was the story of the Clotilda slave ship, which actually did come into the United States under the cover of night in, I believe, June or July of 1860 with 120 Africans who were kidnapped from Benin and the Kingdom of Dahomey. And because they were brought in so late, even though the transatlantic slave trade was allegedly abolished in 1808, the Civil War ended in 1865. So those 120 Africans remembered being kidnapped, remembered being put on the ship, and so and their descendants are still living in Mobile, Alabama, where they were brought, and they had formed their own community known as Africa Town. And in 2019, the Clotilda was finally found because after the ship was brought in 1860, the owners burnt it and sank it, and it had been underneath the water until 2019 when it was finally found and they resurrected and they had this whole big ceremony. When all that happened, I was watching those stories, watching the documentaries, listening to the podcast. I was obsessed with the story. So then that filtered into the work that I was doing. Other moments of history, I kind of knew. I'd read the warmth of Other Suns years ago, and so that knowledge was in my head. One interview that I did on my podcast, Black and Published, was with George McCalman, who did the book Illustrated Black History, but he also worked on the book Black Food. And I remember talking to him, and he was like, you can always tell through food when something is out of place in the world, because what items did not indigenously grow somewhere. So I think about okra specifically. Okra was not native to the United States. It is here because it was brought on the backs and on the heads of enslaved African people, right? And so I thought about that in the stories of history that, because the slave trade was so rampant in Africa, that they would braid their hair with the things of home to bring. So I wanted to incorporate that history. Knowing how hair was used in freedom movements, I wanted to incorporate that history. Um, for the contemporary story, I'm from the South Side of Chicago. That was very much steeped in my nostalgia, and steeped in the history of my city and the things that I learned growing up and the Black history that I learned. And so I wanted to infuse all of that, the importance of the Pullman Porters, the work that they did, the threats that they faced for making sure that the Chicago Defender was spread all across the nation. That was their work. They brought that newspaper and put it into the hands of Black people to let them know that there was life outside of the South and you could survive and thrive in other places like a California or like Chicago or like New York or like Philadelphia or in all these other receiving posts of the Great Migration. I wanted to incorporate all of that. So a lot of the knowledge I had already. Some of it was because of other projects that I was working on or other articles that I had written. The hardest time period for me to write was Nadia in the 1980s, because I was like, what was happening in the 1980s in Chicago? It was just before I was born. And so that was kind of the hardest thing to do. But for those scenes, they're mostly inside. They may be in a club once or twice. But for most of those scenes in that particular time period, the characters are like in the house or in the apartment or in somewhere else, right? They're not really out and about in the world, but even still making nods to those different types of things.
Yes, yes, just yes. All of those things.
I'll tell you,
Love the research.
the 80s, I mean, obviously nailed, but the bachelor pad of Romans with the card table and two chairs, I was like, oh yeah, I felt, I was like, oh yeah.
That's still about.
Yep, that's still. I nailed that one too. Yeah. So you got it from all the way back forward. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But no, I definitely think that the readers, they will appreciate the amount of research and truth that is woven into it. I guess what would you say, is this like historical fiction? Is that like the genre
Yes.
that you think as? Yes, absolutely. But there's there's a lot more truth in it than fiction, honestly. So it's really interesting to read. Definitely is something I'm gonna reread, because you always miss stuff, and when you over the second one, third one, you kind of get more from it. But I'm definitely looking forward to going over it again. I had a question, I just completely lost it. It's off the top of my head. What was it? Oh, I don't know. It was something about the cities, because like the cities, I guess you kind of went over in your last answer, but as I was reading through it, mind you, it's probably been about a month and a half since I started digging into my ancestry. Like, I got like ancestry account. I started talking, like, my uncle, he's Georgia born, right? Like, all my family's born either in Georgia or Indianapolis and South Carolina, but mostly in that Indianapolis, Georgia corridor. Um, and so, but everyone, honestly, there's like huge gap in knowledge from like my mom, my uncle to us. Nobody in my generation is connected compared to them. They're all raised with their cousins. Like, my uncle always jokes that when he went to elementary and high school, everyone was a Monday. Like, everyone was a Monday. He's like, we can play sports and no one be on the team but my own cousins. And that's just kind of like how it was back then. Like, so he grew up in like Rome, Georgia, which is a suburb, I guess you can call it. But like red dirt, green cheese, Georgia. And so there's like one school that everyone went to. Like, I think he went to East Rome because they shut down the other school. So he went to East Rome High. And that's when they segregated. So at first he went to a different school. They segregated schools. They sent him to East Rome High. And so he started showing me like all their yearbooks and all that stuff. And it's always super interesting to delve into the history and how, honestly, we're all taking the same paths. Like, Chicago was a big one. Indianapolis was one where a lot of people went and stayed. Even I have family in Michigan. It's interesting. Obviously, Philadelphia. I think that I'm late to the party, but definitely interested to like learn more about kind of like what happened. There was something that you went over in the book. That's what it was. Thank you. All the rambling paid off. The record keeping sucked. Like, back then, the record keeping was awful. Even like, I know they call it a census, and I learned about this through looking like on my records, my ancestry records, and I was like, this makes no sense. Names are spelled wrong. Sometimes not even close to how it's supposed to be. Um, they'll have like, what is it called? There's nothing on it. Like there was one year for like my great great grandma, because this was like in like late 1800s. Mind you, all the women in my family, like they lived forever. Like I think she lived to be like 100. Her sisters, one of her sisters lived to be like 100 and something. Other one lived to be like 99. Like they're all very long lived. And so there was nothing on there but mulatto and that she can read on the census. That's it. It didn't say anything else. It didn't say anything about her family, anyone. And then like in the later years, it starts talking about like her spouse, her sibling, you know. But it's incredible how bad the record keeping was. Like that is crazy. There was no oversight. But you touched on that. I wanted to bring that up.
No, so like that was one of the scenes I had to revise. In an initial draft, I had Emma and Evangeline going into town to give the information for the census records. And I don't know, I was either reading something or something happened, but I decided to go look it up just to make sure I was being accurate. And I found that no, census workers went door to door in that time period. And they were told to stay outside on the porch and then not to antagonize the who they were talking to, no matter what their feelings were about the people. But their education levels varied, and I've learned this from my mother. My mother is very big into genealogy. She's been tracking our family history on both sides of her mother and her father's sides of the line. One side she has 7 generations. I think on my grandmother's side she has 7 generations, and on my grandfather's side she has 4 generations tracked back. And so like I've gone with her to archives and different museums and record places and things, and my great aunt Helen, who's now passed, she used to have a Bible that had everything, a lot of the old papers that were in the Bible. My mother had made copies of them and things like that. And so you can see the different spelling. Like the family name is Ryan, but with the New Orleans accent, it sounds like Ryan. And so if you look on the spelling on some of the census, it's spelled Rhine instead of Ryan, right? And there's so many different spellings of the name. And so with Emma and Evangeline, I wanted to play on that. And also the reason why the time period of the novel only stretches to 1860 is because I know that after 1870, there are no more census records to look at. You are looking for property records and ship manifests, and those have been long lost to time unless there has been some preservation at a plantation site or within the slaveholding family, and who knows where those documents are.
Yes, awesome. So guys, if you're listening to this, go check out your ancestry, man. You might find some interesting stuff, but just know it's gonna be difficult. Once you go back a few generations, it gets hard. It gets hard. Yeah. You have another question?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Just kidding. When readers close this novel, what do you hope lingers longest?
A few things. When readers finish the novel, I hope that they had an enjoyable experience with it. I hope that they feel cared for and held by the characters as the characters held and cared for me while I was writing it. I do hope it was entertaining for them, even with the heaviness of the history, that even in the heaviness of the history, it was still fun. The hijinks of the characters, the foolishness of the characters, the triflingness of their partners, all of that. I hope it was entertaining for you. What the questions that I think I have for readers when they finish a novel, though, specifically mothers and daughters, but anyone can answer the question, is that, what do parents owe their children? And I said this earlier, do parents owe their children explanation of their lowest moments, of their decisions, of their choices? And then do children owe their parents grace and understanding? And the recognition that, your parent did the best that they could, and for you as a child, that was still not enough. Like those are the two main questions that I have for readers to have amongst themselves, right. and maybe their parents and their family members. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. maybe after this, I want to delve back into that after we.
That's good.
What man? I love this material.
I know.
But yeah, so once again, I just want to thank you for your time today. I know you're busy promoting Seven Daughters of Dupree. Guys, please go get this book. It's everywhere.
It is everywhere.
If you need a place to find it, you can always check the link on here on the description. We'll have links to her website and locations where you can go get this book.
Is there any events, anything you'd like to plug for our audience to know about coming up?
No, so I did a tour for publication week. So for now, I'm just doing online, more podcasts like yours, Instagram lives, different conversations, maybe a few one-off events here and there. But for anything that's big, either check my social media at Nikesha Elise on Instagram, Threads, and now TikTok, as well as my website, newrights.com.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for tuning into another episode of the Markets Podcast. Once again, you guys have the honor of being the author of the Seven Daughters of Dupree.
Yeah.
And we hope that you go get this book. Let's talk about it. Comment, engage, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, I'll see you guys next week.
Okay, don't go anywhere. I have some questions real quick. Don't go anywhere.